Welcome to Toy Business Unboxed, your gateway to the secrets of the toy industry. Here, Jason Shea, a toy entrepreneur and expert in the field.
Every product we develop is really inspired by some of the real life experience that we have with our son.
60% of all toys last year were sold on Amazon, which is incredible.
Be passionate about it because it's a road, it's a journey.
Like when you have an idea that you think is like gonna somewhat like change the world, make things better, I'd say go for it.
We'll guide you through the enchanting world of toy design, marketing, and manufacturing. Now let the unboxing begin.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Toy Business Unboxed. Today we have a special guest, Lauren, a talented freelance toy and game designer and also the founder of Wise Water Studio. Lauren has worked over 20 brands, including Pokemon, Hatchimals, Bluey, with top companies, Pin Master, and Jazzwares. In this episode, we're going to share some of her journey through studying toy design to building a successful freelance business. And we also talk about what does it take to carve out your own path in the toy industry itself, the importance of networking and how the community involvement can really fuel your growth as an entrepreneur or someone that's getting into the toy space. Thank you so much for joining us on the interview today, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start out with your journey. I think during our pre-interview, we were talking about you used to have an architecture career before you do the toy design. Like what lead you to this industry?
So, since I was in grade school, I was really intrigued by the path of becoming an architect. And what really intrigued me was I've always been interested in art, but I was also very good at math. And then I loved the idea of creating that three-dimensional space, not only decorating maybe like what goes in a home, but creating the space of that home, for example, itself. And pursued that path through high school. And then when I finally got to college, and I was able to take some real architecture classes to start to pursue this career. But once I was doing that, I had this realization that, yes, I loved the three-dimensional aspect and the math part was fine, but it was a lot more precise. And I think I wanted to be a lot more creative. And so I had to rethink, okay, maybe I don't want to do architecture, but I know I want to do something in art and probably something three-dimensional. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so living here, there's not a huge art industry or in terms of variety, especially if I wanted to do maybe something like animation, or that was something I was thinking about. Obviously, out in Southern California, there's a lot of art opportunities and a lot of art colleges. So I went there to explore some different schools and tour them. And it was when I was touring Otis College of Art and Design that I found out about the toy program that they had. And I didn't know about it because there's only two schools in the world that has it. Otis and the Fashion Institute in New York. And so I was very intrigued by the toy program, and toys just seemed so fun. And when I was young, I always loved playing with all my different toys. So I was very intrigued, but I wasn't still totally sure what I wanted to do. But I was able to speak with one of the toy design professors and just pick his brain a little and hear his story. And he was talking about how he was designing toys, but then Coleman wanted him to design their toasters. And he said, I'm designing toys. Why do you want me to design toasters? But they said, we want your expertise in designing the safety in mind, because as a toy designer, you have to think about small parts or parts that can break. You always have to be thinking about that in the forefront of the design process, not after when a child has choked on the product, right?
Oh, for sure.
So they wanted that thinking, that forward thinking in the design process. So that's why they wanted him to do that. So he said, if you can design a toy, you can also design other products too. But because product designers are trained differently, they can't necessarily just jump right in.
And this is a regular toaster, not a toy toaster, correct?
Right. Yeah, like a real toaster that would go on in the kitchen. But they wanted it to be totally safe. They didn't want it to have like potential problems. I think with his training in toy, that really helped them to foresee what issues might be.
And just for my own curiosity here, how exactly do they build out the program? Was it like a 2-year program, a 4-year program? What do you actually learn through the program?
Yeah, so at Otis College of Art and Design, the first year is they call it the foundation year. And you're just taking more like general classes, like no matter what major you'll go into, you're all getting like your gen eds in art. And then all the majors are like a 3-year program. So luckily, because I had gone to UW Milwaukee when I was wanting to pursue architecture, I was able
Mhm.
to transfer to Otis and then start right into the toy design program. So then I was
Oh,
at Otis for 3 years, and the way they structure their program is that you'll take a doll class and an action figure class,
okay.
besides drawing classes and learning programs, ZBrush and Adobe Illustrator and other Adobe programs and things like that. The main toy courses are by that category. Maybe you see yourself wanting to be someone who works with very young kids, maybe like preschool age. When you have your doll class, you can make a doll that's for preschoolers. And then when your action figure class, you can make action figures for preschoolers. So if you have in mind what age group you feel like suits your style or design skills, that you can start to build your portfolio around that while still getting a variety of categories in your portfolio.
Interesting. And the program you say is 3 years for from the
Yes.
beginning to the end? Oh, I see. And did most of the people that graduate from that program, did they end up working as a toy designer in one of those bigger toy companies that the usual career path to go through?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of a lot of toy companies actually right near Otis and besides just Southern California in general. It's very often that people will go to one of those companies after school or even while they're in school, they'll have internships at those companies too.
I see. So for your own experience, you also work with some of the major toy company. How was that transitioning look like for you?
It was interesting because I graduated from Otis in 2020. Although it was the pandemic, I knew that after I graduated, I wanted to move back home to Wisconsin to be closer to my family and
Yeah.
everything. So there's a few in Chicago, which is close by, and even Play Monsters in Beloit, Wisconsin. So I knew there were opportunities close to home. I went to Toy Fair in February, right
Mhm.
before the pandemic hit, and tried
Yeah.
to speak with these companies
Yeah.
that were gonna be close to home. But of course, with the world just beginning to shift, it was a little difficult to make connections at that time. But
True.
because everybody was working remote, someone over that summer, someone from Jazzwares reached out to me about working on the Pokemon team as like a temp to perm position.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So then luckily I moved back to Wisconsin, but I was able to pursue that opportunity. And
Mhm.
then things were going well, and they wanted to hire me full time after a few months, but
Yeah.
they wanted me to move to LA so that when they did go back in the office that I could be there in the office, which
Yeah.
was a very hard decision at that time. I'm just starting my career. Like,
Mhm.
okay, yes, we're still in the pandemic. Do I need to move back to LA for the sake of my career, or do I stay home and find a different path? So I decided to stay in Wisconsin and turn down the full time position with Jazzwares. But luckily, around that time too, as it so happens, the designer who recruited me to Jazzwares had since gone to Spin Master,
Mhm.
and she was reaching out to me asking how things were going. And we were chatting, and she asked me if I had interest in doing some freelance for Spin Master. So that's why the freelance career.
I see. So I think that's how you started. Were you so that's before you started your own, I guess, studio and all that, right?
Exactly.
I see. Can you also tell us the decision on what make you to decide just to create something by yourself instead of working in the corporate ladder route?
I'll say, although when I was in school, freelance was something I was very interested in. You create your own schedule, you can work from anywhere. It was a very intriguing idea and concept of a career.
Mhm.
But when I and other classmates of mine inquired about like doing freelance, like when we were in school, it was very encouraged to pursue a bit more of a traditional path and work at a toy company first so you can get the experience and understand how the industry works and how just the design process works at a company. And
Yeah.
then you can go on to do freelance because you have that background.
Mhm.
So when I found myself doing freelance first or really starting my career with freelance, it was a little difficult to initially see that this was a path that was okay and that there's not really a right or wrong. And like looking back, I can see that. And so it took a few years of doing freelance consistently and making a living out of doing freelance for me to realize, oh, I am succeeding regardless of what I was encouraged to do. So I'm not doing something wrong. I'm not pursuing my career
Mhm.
down a wrong path. I'm making my own path and I'm making it work. So, in a sense,
Mhm.
by creating a design studio, I was committing to that path of freelance and also just establishing an LLC so that I can maybe work with other designers too to expand what I can offer to clients and also pitch game concepts to companies as an inventor and really just like branch out and grow who I am as an individual and as like my own company.
What are some of the challenges that you have faced as a freelance toy designer, and how have you overcome some of them?
I think the two biggest ones would be work-life balance and also financial stability. So
Oh, I
with work,
struggle with both of them myself.
right. Well, it's all about being an entrepreneur. It's
Yeah.
no risk, no reward. But I think there's strategic ways that you can control as much as you can, even though there's, in a sense, always that risk factor. But with work life balance, a lot of times I have to be working for myself. So I'm not necessarily getting paid by a client if I'm going through emails or just reaching out to potential clients or just building my brand, promoting my business. That's all on my time that I'm not getting paid for. It
Mhm.
will bring in more clients. So it will bring in money, but still, so that's then in with the financial aspect too, that you're paid less consistently because it depends when you submit the invoices. And so staying on top of that part of the business, like it's all a balance. You know, I'll have to not only be getting the work done on time, but also making sure for yourself that you're creating that consistent flow of
Mhm.
income and
Yeah.
so that you have something to count on for yourself. And the more you work, the more you get paid, but the less you work, yes, you create your own schedule, but if you work less, then you get paid less. So it's all a balance. There's no
I
like
see.
PTO, how full-time jobs have, but it has a lot more
Yeah.
flexibility than a full-time job. It's
Sure.
all give and
Yeah.
take.
And for your typical client, how long is the engagement usually? Is it like a 6 months, a year contract? And what is typically the scope of work when you're working with client?
It really all depends on the client. A lot of times, like I worked with Moose for a little bit, but they just needed help for a certain amount of time. Or sometimes I've helped certain teams like at Jazzwares because maybe they're in like a transitional period where, maybe one of the designers went to a different department or a different company. And so they have this like gaps that they need to fill. And since, I'm familiar with the brand, I worked on Pokemon team when I first started. So I was able to
Yeah.
just fill in and help out to keep things moving along. So sometimes it's just like ongoing with
Mhm.
time. And there's a designer in the costumes department at Jazzwares that I've worked
Yeah.
with like really since I started. And so sometimes it'll come in waves. I'll do a lot of work
Mm.
for her in a week, but then, maybe the next week I won't do very much for her, if at all. And then other clients, I just had a client where I was really working on kind of the full scope of the project. I
Mm.
created the concept and then the spec documents for the factory. So I was really doing it all myself. And so that was more like a set time, like a month that I was really working on that. So sometimes it's that short, like one project for a
Mhm.
month or for a few weeks or something, or it's just
Mhm.
like ongoing. Oh, can you
I see.
create or edit this spec document?
I see. So is most of the client, I'm just also trying to understand who is your ideal client for the people that you work with. So will you say it's mostly the bigger company that's looking for outsource some of their work, or do you also work with some of the smaller like startup company like myself? I'm definitely a startup still.
I guess in terms of an ideal client for me would be maybe like a consistent client, someone who maybe often gives me work as in a sense like something I can count on for
Mm.
the income. But other than that, I don't know. I love working with more individuals, more startups, because I think I get to have a hand a lot more in the whole design process, and I can create
Mhm.
the concept and help them fill in all the details because then I'm the expert in that context. But it's
Yeah.
also fun to just, and in a sense, like it's a little easier to do things that I'm very familiar with that are just not the same. If I'm working on spec documents for costumes or for
Yeah.
Pokemon, it's very familiar. I can just find my flow and get those things done very quickly and efficiently, but it's a lot easier. It's good to have a challenge too. So it's all fun.
That's a hard one to balance. Do you have any particular goal for 2025 on how many clients you're trying to get to? Are you trying to build your team out more next year as well, or in 2025?
Yeah, I began working with like a few other designers who have different skills than myself, and I guess I'd love to work with them more. And I guess in terms of a number of clients, I don't necessarily have a goal because like I said, sometimes I have maybe one client that keeps me busy for however long, and I think that's totally fine. And so but what I am excited about and intrigued by was always expanding my clientele, maybe working for a new company, especially maybe a larger toy company that I haven't worked for, or having a new project.
That's some of the thing you are still doing with your company to, more people.
Most definitely. I always go to whatever trade shows I'm able to. This year, I went to a good number of them. I
Mhm.
went to Astra and Licensing Expo. I went to Chicago Toy and Game Fair just recently. And then I also went to Toy Association for LA Preview, had a networking event at
Mhm.
Otis where I went to school. So I got to
Oh,
go to
okay, okay.
that.
Nice, 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 nice. That sounds like a fun event to go to. I didn't went to the LA preview, but I did went to the Licensing Expo and Astra as well myself. So okay, that's
Yeah.
really cool. And you have been working with a lot of different type of brand. And I guess like when you're approaching companies, what's your unique like value proposition for the people that's considering to hire your companies and your services versus hiring another employee to work for them full time?
Think myself specifically because I have this formal education in toy design
Yeah.
that is, and because most people with my background go to work at a toy company full time.
Yeah.
There's very
Yeah.
few I think that have my few if have my background who are doing freelance full time and aren't
True.
just doing freelance maybe like between jobs. Like this is
Mm,
your career is freelance in my design
true.
studio. So since I can be a designer that they can count on like long term if they need.
True, and not a lot of people choose that route just because of the several different reasons that you mentioned earlier. I know you're also involved with the Women in Toy Association. How has been involving with the Women in Toys organization really benefit your company so far?
In lots of ways, besides being able to have support from this community, you can, when you're a part of something like Women in Toy, I think it's a lot more comfortable to maybe talk to new people. So Licensing Expo, Women in Toy had a breakfast.
Yeah.
You're at a trade show and, overwhelming, like you approach to talk to, but you're at maybe like a Women in Toy event. I think it's so much more comfortable because you at least have that in common that you're both a part of this group and this community. And you think it's even because we're a part of that community, people are a lot more just like willing to hear their story or connect and help you, especially if you're starting out. It's so important to be involved in communities in that way because I think people want to help each other.
Actually, my sister, who is also our marketing director, is also part of Women in Toys, and I think she also provide mentorship with some of one other member from the organization to help them out. Well, so based on my conversation with her, I know there's a lot of activities, and actually, the chairwoman of Women in Toy was on our podcast in the past as well. So I'm very
That's awesome.
familiar with their organization, and also trying to in other potential way to partner with their organization. And I think there's a lot of wonderful networking organization and also professional organization that is very beneficial for either entrepreneur like ourselves or other people, professional people in the toy industry to connect and also learn from each other. And that's also the mission of our podcast is to share stories, share different paths because not everyone want to be an entrepreneur and not everyone want to do the freelancing route. Maybe some people just want to have a career, but just like you say, there's also some pros and cons in that choices. You don't have a lot flexibility and you might not able to choose the project you want to work on because it's just whatever your boss tell you to do, you cannot work on it, right?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, freelancer like you and me, I think we have a little bit more choice, type of client that we want to work with and who we want to, like what we want to do in our own careers, have a little bit more control over that. So that's definitely major differences. Lead me to my next question. What advice do you have for other, potential people that's thinking about freelancing in the toy industry? What is the best way to get started into freelancing more?
Yeah, I know we were talking about going to the trade shows or the toy industry events. That's so important, and especially for meeting new people and getting new clients. When I was first getting into freelance, I had like my teachers from school, kind of her a lot. Do I get more clients? How do I
Yeah,
find freelance? And she told me,
yeah.
oh, the freelance comes to you, and that's a little
It's that's not how it work in real life, though. It doesn't just come to you automatically. You need to make that initial connection, right? So, yeah,
Right. I think what she said was just
yeah.
very there's a lot more context to be had. I didn't quite have it in that moment.
Oh,
So
true.
kind of what I know now and thinking back to what she said, like what
Mm,
she said was pretty accurate, at least for what I've experienced.
I
But it's, go to these events and you meet people and you're not necessarily marketing yourself exclusively, right? Like go and you meet these people and you want to connect with them as people first. And then
yeah,
you obviously are going to share to each other, you do professionally and you tell them that you're a freelancer. They might say, oh, you have a project that I need a freelance toy designer for. Like, would you be interested in working together? And so that's really how work comes to you, or you're working with designers at a bigger company, and maybe one of their coworkers or someone that they know from a different department or brand expresses that they would need some help from a freelancer, and then you pass your name on. So it's
mm,
definitely those relationships and those connections are so important and so key to getting that freelance. It's really all about your network and also maintaining those relationships, not just having them professional and work oriented. Like, want to get to know these people as people, to really connect.
I think one thing I don't know if you also struggle with this is because I meet so many people in my day to days. I was looking at how much meeting I have each month. On average, I meet about 100 new people a month. So it's hard to keep remember every single conversation and what was going on when you're meeting so many different people through networking, through virtual meetings, through conferences. What you say is definitely true. Like networking is really important, especially for the line of work that you do. And my next question for you is like, how do you really balance like because of the type of work you do is it's definitely like a very creative focus, but there's also like other business aspect when you're managing your own design studio. How do you balance between those two elements?
Yeah. Well, I'm a very organized person, and mom's an accountant, so I get a lot of her like kind of technical and like
Yeah.
structural organization while also being like very creative, visual art field. So the business part comes very naturally to me, and just to kind of keep track of everything, my Excel document,
Uh-huh.
even kind of going in its own way. So for me, it's not necessarily something that I have to push myself to do. And I think that's why this path has worked out so well for me. Because just talking about, oh, you meet all these people at events, and it sounds like you meet way more people than I do. But after I go to an event and I, like these business cards, or even if I'm just meeting somebody, back of the business card, I'll put like a little note of like where I met this person, maybe what we talked about, or just something like that, so that when I see them again, I can kind of go back to that, or even just, years down the line, maybe if I want to remember back to when I met them or how I met them, that, that documented. And then I
Okay.
have like digital document of just trying to connect my whole network
I
in a
see.
sense. And
Yeah, you have to use a CRM or a client relationship management system, right?
yeah,
For a couple thousand people in there trying to keep track of. So you can get kind of key. And
because you have to nurture those connections. You can't just, meet somebody one time and then expect them to come back to you, right? Like
yeah,
you kind of freelancer have to be in charge of that and take that initiative to maintain those relationships.
for sure. So as we're kind of approaching toward the end of the podcast, the final question I always like to ask, especially the guests, is if you have to say to someone that's brand new to the toy industry, that's just getting started, what would be your advice?
Really, I would say this to anyone, but to really follow your heart and, push yourself to try new things. And, especially as a freelancer, have to be willing to learn new skills and go outside of your comfort zone and anything like that. And it's also worth it. And it might be a challenge at first, especially if you're an introvert like myself, but the more you push yourself, the easier it becomes and kind of more natural it feels. And you're pursuing something you love, you might not exactly know what that path looks like, but you'll make the path and you'll figure it out. And you want to love what you do, right? Because
Yeah.
is you accept so much of our lives. So you have to follow your passions and everything else will follow.
Sure. Yeah, I agree to that. So how can people find you online?
I'll say primarily on LinkedIn is, how I come to communicate with a lot of people initially. And then,
Yeah.
have my website is connected to my LinkedIn and resume and my email. And so it kind of is out from LinkedIn.
Those of our listeners, thank you for tuning in for this episode of Toy Business Unboxed podcast. We really hope you enjoy the conversation and find it insightful and also inspiring. If you like what you have heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your support and would love it if you can leave us a review and share the podcast with your friend and colleague. For more resource tips and the latest update within the toys and game industry, visit our website at toy-launch.com. Join our conversation and connect with us on social media using hashtag Toy Business Unboxed. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, keep innovating, keep creating, and keep bringing joys to toys. This is Jason Shea, signing off on the Toy Business Unboxed podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.